So in today's video, I just wanted to sit down and share a story with you guys because I love when you guys get to know me a little bit better when it comes to like my favorite shows, movies, video games, etc. so on. And I thought it would be a nice video today if I talked about what my favorite video game console is of all time. Because obviously there's many options out there. There's the NES, there's the PlayStation 2, there's the N64, there's the Xbox 360, there's the Game Boy Advance, 3DS, etc. so on. There's many options out there that you can choose from to name it like, yeah, it's my favorite console of all time. But the one console that I didn't name when I was listing a lot of those other consoles that happens to be my favorite console of all time is this Super Nintendo. And yes, I wasn't born around the time when this console came out, but it was a big part of my childhood growing up because it was the very first time I ever played a video game. Like my first video game is Super Mario World, which I already made a video giving my thoughts on how I felt about that game. So if you guys want to check out that video, be sure to do so. I'll leave a little link that pops up in this video so you guys can check that out and you can hear me dive into why I love that game so much. But I still will talk about it a little bit in this video. But this was the very console that introduced me into everything. So if it wasn't for this console, I wouldn't have gotten introduced to the world of gaming. I wouldn't know what Final Fantasy was, or God of War, or Horizon, Pokemon, or other franchises that I happen to be big fans of. If it wasn't for the Super Nintendo, I wouldn't be where I am now. And the whole story of how it started with me and the Super Nintendo is that it was actually my mom and my aunt's console. So it was a console that they grew up with, which was pretty cool because it's like, oh, I get to play this console that they grew up with. So my mom could actually help me figure out like how to play the console, how to use the controller properly, how to press the right buttons when I'm playing the game. So I thought it was really cool. It's like, okay, we got the console in the house. My mom and my aunt grew up with it. That's pretty dope. And the game that I played on there, like I just talked about not that long ago, was Super Mario World. It was the first game that introduced me into the world of gaming. And I absolutely love that game. It's my favorite Mario game of all time. I just love how you get to play as Mario. You get to find Yoshi in that game. You get to travel with Yoshi. You get to fight each of the different Koopalings. You get to fight Bowser in the end when you throw those little Koopas up in the air to hit him in the head. And then eventually Princess Peach falls down and then you get to rescue her and go on vacation. You get the ability in the game, which I absolutely loved, which was the cape, where Mario practically turned into a superhero and he was just flying all around the map. It was just very cool and I had a lot of fun with that game. And I believe I was like 5 or 6 when I first started playing video games. So at first I really wasn't the best and I didn't really expect myself to be like this expert where I was participating in like all these tournaments and I was winning a whole bunch of money and trophies. Like I didn't really expect myself to be at that level, especially when I'm like 5 or 6 years old. But I remember spending so much time with that game. And I actually remember like every time I came home from school, and that was when I was in like kindergarten and first grade, I remember each time I came home, I was like, hey mom, can I play the Super Nintendo? Can I play the Super Nintendo? Because after a while, when I kept playing it more and more and more, and it's just like with every other game, or whenever you get like used to a habit that you do all the time, you get addicted to it. And I was very addicted to playing the Super Nintendo when it came to Super Mario World. And I remember I was actually 6 years old, or maybe 7, but it was around there, like 6 or 7 years old. I remember around then that I actually beat Super Mario World for the first time. So knowing that I was like 6 or 7 years old, beating Super Mario World, for that being like the first game that got me into everything, it was just a really cool experience. And then of course from there, I branched off to other games that we've had on the console as well, because Mario was a big part of my family. It still is till this day. That's why I'm like so into Mario, and that's why I always make a lot of videos talking about it on the channel, which of course you guys are going to keep getting more and more videos like that in the future. But when it came to other games that I branched out on, I also came across Donkey Kong Country, and Donkey Kong Country was a cool game. I mean, it's Donkey Kong's first standalone game, so it's not like the Donkey Kong game that you saw in the 80s where Mario's climbing up a whole bunch of ladders and Donkey Kong is holding Pauline captive, and then you got to use the hammer to like break all of those barrels that Donkey Kong throws at you. Like, no, this is actually Donkey Kong's standalone game. You get to play the game as Donkey Kong, and you also have a traveling companion in that game, which is Diddy Kong. So you and Diddy get to go through the game. There's a lot of Kremlings that you run into, and then you eventually run across King K. Rool. And I still remember when I played the first game, because I believe I only played the first game. Sometime down the road, I got to play the second and third. I do know about them, but I definitely have to play the second and third in full, because I know you get to play as like Dixie Kong in like the second game with Diddy Kong, which is pretty cool. But I remember that when I was playing the first game, you come across King K. Rool towards the end, which I'm really happy that Smash brought back King K. Rool, because King K. Rool is awesome. But I love how when you were fighting him, you were just running around on a ship and you were trying to dodge all these different kinds of attacks. Like I remember he had like one attack where he like took off his crown and he threw it at you kind of like a boomerang, and you were playing as Donkey Kong and Diddy, and you had to jump on him in order to defeat him so you can finally beat the game. And you could be like, okay, finally I beat King K. Rool. And it was very fun. Like for a Donkey Kong game, it was very fun, and it's honestly probably like one of the best Donkey Kong games that I played. I just happen to be a sucker when it comes to classic games. Like when somebody asked me, oh, how can you go back to like those old games? They look so weird now. It's like, why don't you play the games like the modern graphics where everything looks like all HD and it looks a lot better? I'm like, I could still play those games and I love them. At the same time, I can't be like, hey, I'm not going to go back and play the Super Nintendo, because the Super Nintendo had a lot of bangers. And another game that I also enjoyed playing as well on the Super Nintendo was Super Metroid. And I didn't beat Super Metroid, but I did spend quite some time on Super Metroid. But I remember when I played Super Metroid, I thought it was a very fun game. I enjoyed it. I remember whenever it came to a Metroid game at first, when I was first getting introduced to the series, I always got lost in that game. Like, yes, I know there was a map where it told you where you had to go within the game so it could help you out along the way, and you know what areas you visited before, so you're not always going back to the same place again. But I still remember when I was like a young kid and I was playing Super Metroid, I got lost. I didn't know where I was going, and then there was areas that was like blocked off because I didn't have a specific suit that Samus needed around that time, because I remember there was like an area in that game where you needed like a specific suit to travel through, otherwise you would end up losing health. So I was like all over the place in that game, but that game was very fun. I had a lot of fun playing it, and I can always like go back and be like, oh yeah, I'll go play Super Metroid again, or I can go play Donkey Kong Country again, or especially I can always go back and play Super Mario World again, which I've had done numerous times, and I beat that game and even begin to tell you how many times. Like I know it's definitely in the double digits now because I played through that game so much. When it came to like traveling through different areas throughout the game, discovering certain parts that I didn't know about before, like the secret areas where you have like those little hidden keys that you find in a level, and then it brings you to like area where you see like these little stars, and then you launch yourself on the star, you're into the star world, and you find all those different colored Yoshis. There's just like a lot of things that I'm like thinking back on. I'm like, oh my god, this was awesome. And then you also had the Kirby Superstar game, which I've had played and I have beaten, and that's a lot of fun playing as Kirby, plucking up all these different kinds of enemies, gaining their abilities, fighting all these different kinds of bosses. I also remember playing Super Mario RPG. I didn't play it in full. I do actually own the remake of Super Mario RPG that recently came out, so I definitely want to play that, and of course the original as well. But I remember having a lot of fun with Super Mario RPG based on like how far I got into the game, and that was very fun. And I just love the Super Nintendo. Like, I get it, it's old school. It came out around like the early 90s. I wasn't really around when the game initially launched and all the hype was there. I really wish I was. Like, I still go back and look at like old commercials promoting the games and stuff, and it was really cool. Especially like when it came to those commercials like promoting like the Super Mario World game. I thought that was pretty dope. I just loved all the old school game commercials that you saw back then. Like, they're definitely a lot different than the ones that we get today, which you can clearly tell that time has evolved ever since then. But it was fun, like just playing the Super Nintendo, having the opportunity to play it at a young age, having my mom teach me the basics so I know how to use the controllers depending on which game I'm playing. And obviously the more and more I play the console, I get used to it, I start to adjust to it. I'm able to learn how to properly play the games, because like I said, I was a young kid. I didn't really know how to do everything that well back then. But obviously as time went on and as I got older and I decided to hook up the Super Nintendo and play the games again, I was definitely a lot better than I was as a kid, which, you know, comes to the point where it's like, okay, you just got to keep practicing more and more, then eventually you get good after a while. So it's just all process of just training yourself, and then you'll eventually adapt to it after a while. But I had a lot of fun playing the Super Nintendo at a young age, and that's honestly like the whole reason why the Super Nintendo is my favorite console. There's just a lot of nostalgia behind it, and it's just very important to me. And I actually have like fan art hanging up in my room of like a Super Nintendo controller, because it just means a lot to me, because it was the console that introduced me into the world of gaming. If it wasn't for the Super Nintendo, if it wasn't for Super Mario World, I wouldn't know what video games were. I would have never had to experience like that era of video games growing up as a kid when they were still coming out. And of course, you know, eventually moving on to other systems like a GameCube and a Wii and a PlayStation 2 and 3 and 4, you know, etc. so on. If it wasn't for this very moment where I decided to pick up that controller and play that console, I wouldn't be where I am today. And for that, I thank my mom, I thank Super Mario World, and I thank the Super Nintendo for everything that it gave me growing up as a kid and growing into an adult that I am now. But other than that, that's honestly like all my thoughts on this. So I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this. Like, is the Super Nintendo your favorite console, or do you guys have other consoles that you had a lot of memories with that you guys want to share with me? Be sure to let me know all your thoughts on that, like your favorite console, your favorite games, just anything overall. Let me know in the comment section down below. And also, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And if you guys want to check out my social media, be sure to check out my Twitter, my TikTok, and my Instagram. It is all located in the description below. Be sure to click on the bell for notifications so you guys notify whenever I upload a new video on the channel, so you don't miss any upload when I post a new YouTube video. But other than that, I hope all of you guys are having a fantastic day, wherever the day may be, if it's the daytime, the nighttime, or the evening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, peace out.